Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Diplomatic Enclave. I'm your host Omar Khalid. But as is the norm with our show, we interview heads of organizations, ambassadors, sometimes prime ministers and ministers as well. The whole concept of the show is to make people understand or introduce them to the organization or to the country that my guest represents, and also to understand how that organization or that country works and how the collaboration between our country and their organization or their country is robust also in these times, and what are the good points, what are the things that they are working on as well, and how can they further improve the relationship between Pakistan and their country or their organization. Today we have a very special guest with us. He is special because of many reasons, let's put it that way. When I began my show way back end of 2013, 2014, my first two guests were heads of two of the organizations that are part of that bigger picture. I think you understand what I'm trying to get to. I'm talking of the United Nations. Now, my first guests were World Food Programme and FAO, and both their directors had been my guests. I was a bit jittery then way back end of 2013, 2014, but I have never forgotten my association with the United Nations. Our channel has also had an MOU signed with the United Nations also in the past, and we've had a very robust relationship as far as our channel and the UN is concerned in Pakistan. What also fascinates me is the way the United Nations has been working diligently in Pakistan in many spheres, how it has, despite the hurdles like floods, like other issues, never set back and have always moved forward with a very positive attitude to work together for the people, for the nation, for collaboration, and for continuing this friendship that has been continuing since 1947, when Pakistan became a member of the United Nations, just 2 years after the United Nations came into being in 1945. We have the privilege to have with us the resident coordinator of the United Nations in Pakistan, Excellency Mohamed Yahya, with us. Mr. Yahya, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Yahya, you're just not the resident coordinator, you are also the humanitarian coordinator as far as the United Nations in Pakistan is concerned. When you look at your CV, you can't help but be impressed. The 20 years or 20 years plus experience that you've had within the ambit of the United Nations speaks volumes of your professionalism. What part of that professionalism do you bring as resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator in Pakistan?
Well, first, thank you again. I'm really excited and honored to come to this show. I've heard a lot about the show, and it's always been waiting to be invited. So thank you very much for inviting me. So yes, I've been with the United Nations in many contexts. In this region, I've worked in Afghanistan previously. Also worked in Africa, in East and Western Africa, but also in the headquarters. So I have a privilege of having worked what we call our headquarters, our epicenter, which is New York, but also at the regional levels on policy issues, but also here now in the field. So I bring that diverse experience of working in different contexts, countries like Ethiopia, where we had a 10-15% GDP growth before current instability started, and the UN had to support countries with policy and technical advice, to countries which were in conflict, like Afghanistan, and where we had to do basic things such as restarting, helping institutions grow. I've also worked in countries that were coming out of conflict, such as Liberia, where I had the privilege of actually being protected by Pakistani soldiers who were peacekeepers in bringing peace.
They have quite a reputation when it comes to peacekeeping, don't
Absolutely, and they have been impeccable. I have met a lot of the officers in the field, in the very deep field. It's not only in the capitals, such as Monrovia, but actually in border areas where Pakistani soldiers played an incredible role in bringing peace and stability in those kind of communities. So I bring all those different contexts, and also I'm here not to say that I know everything. I am here to learn also as well, learn from this diverse country, its culture, and its own unique complexities. But more importantly, I'm here to lead 24 agencies who are here at the behest of the government and people of Pakistan, and to see where Pakistan wants to go and how we can help their ambition. So within the UN, we have what's called a cooperation framework agreement we signed with the government of Pakistan, which is a 5-year plan, and where Pakistan tells us this is the area we want UN support, both technical, programmatic, but also attracting finance for the country.
All right, Mr. Yahya, I see a lot of experience in the development sector because you've worked a lot under the UNDP. When you look at Pakistan and we look at the development sector, I feel it's a very important sector that needs to be further boosted in the right direction. How can that happen? What kind of methodology do you feel during your tenure you could bring about as far as Pakistan's development strategy is concerned?
Pakistan is a very big and diverse country, as you know, and the challenges are diverse. So for example, I just went to Chitral for the first time, most incredibly beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was telling colleagues, my Pakistani colleagues, why did you hide this from the rest of us? We'll have visited here as tourists if we had known you had such an incredibly beautiful country. But the challenges there are very different from the challenges of Sindh, for example. The challenges in Chitral is around issues of climate change, issues of glacial outbursts, challenges around water. So our support to Chitral will be very different to the support, for example, we will provide to Punjab or the support we provide to Balochistan. So we try to tailor each province's needs, and we then bring the kind of technical capacity the UN has. Not only the teams that are based here, but we have incredible capacities across the world that we can bring in to help Pakistan. And we're already doing that in the areas of education, in the areas of health. I always say, if you look at the Pakistan's commitment to eradicate polio, as an example.
And today's, by the time the program will be aired, the World Polio Day would have gone. But
yes,
the day we are recalling it is the World
also
Polio Day.
Polio, absolutely. So the world, and one of the things the UN does is backstop government efforts to eradicate polio by 2026. We are behind all that kind of support we provide to government. So we're incredibly close to the Pakistani people. And one of the things I always want to emphasize is the UN is very different from other organizations, as you said in your introduction, because Pakistan is part of us. It's a member state. Pakistan is not alien to the UN. And if you look at the values of the UN from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 16, it's a Pakistani insertion. Your representative pushed for the idea of removing child marriage and enforcing women's equality as part of the Declaration of Human Rights. If you look at human development, we talk about human development every day. The UN's development angle looks at through the prism of human development, invest in people rather than investing in things. Whose ideas were that? Pakistani, Mahbubul Haq. So the UN's entire DNA has many imprints of Pakistan since for the last 77 years that Pakistan has been a member.
All right, Mr. Yahya, I'd like to say something that you quoted some time back, and I found some of your quotes, and I'd like to quote them because they're, I feel, important and pertinent in Pakistan's context as well. You've said, I've been displaced from my own home at the age of 3 or 4 when we left home in Somalia. You say, a little bit of me was, I must say, envious of them that they're able to go back home. I always imagine how I'll feel when I go back home without fear. You say, as a refugee, there's always a sense of something missing because you deprived of going back to where you were born. How important is the role of the United Nations when it comes to refugee situations across the world? We have had also, we've helped the refugees in Afghanistan since the last 4 decades as well. And we understand what the refugee situation means to those who come in other countries and stay there. And I could relate a lot to the quote that you said. But what I want to understand is, when it comes to the situation of refugees across the world, how important is the role of the United Nations? Is the developed world cognizant of the tragedy that engulfs all of these refugees whenever they are displaced from one country to the other?
Absolutely. So one of the key questions I'm always asked, what is the United Nations? What does the United Nations do? And I hear this in some places that I've worked in, and also in Pakistan. The values and the norms of, for example, protecting refugees, it's part of the UN's declaration and UN norms. Pakistan has been extremely generous you have hosted refugees here. I can tell you, I was displaced, as you quoted, at a young age. I wish I had the similar generosity that Pakistan has shown in our initial displacement. Because in many countries, refugees are in camps. They're not allowed to leave. In many countries, refugees don't have opportunity to go to universities. And in Pakistan, I have seen how you have been extremely generous in getting Afghan refugees, protecting them, allowing them to be educated, using your universities. So you've been extremely generous. But we also then remind Pakistan that your generosity has been incredible, but we can always do more. What do we do more around protecting refugees? How do we ensure there's no involuntary return? People are not returned to places where they don't want to go or they feel they're at risk, especially in Afghanistan, where you have terrible conditions for women, as you know, the edicts that have been passed on girls' education. So we're engaging with the Pakistani government and the Pakistani authorities, and they have been very receptive in being sensitive around involuntary return of refugees. Now, what is the world doing about refugees? Not enough. I think very few countries host majority of the refugees. 60% are hosted by less than 10
Pakistan
countries
is
in the
one
world.
of the examples who has hosted the refugees for the largest amount.
Exactly.
The number of refugees that we hosted.
Absolutely, and you have been incredibly generous. I said, not only hosted refugees, you have used your social welfare system, your schools, your health, to allow the refugees to use it from universities who are refugees. So Pakistan has been generous, and I said the numbers are incredible. And if you look at other countries like Turkey, also huge numbers. So is the burden of refugees equally shared in the world? Absolutely not. Many of the refugees live in developing countries and neighboring countries that host them. The argument we make at the UN is the international community, the rich countries, can do much more in sharing the burden, in supporting countries like Pakistan to make sure that Pakistan is not left alone to deal with the burden that is an international issue, is not a Pakistani issue alone.
Mr. Yahya, I'd like to quote you again because there are some very interesting quotes that are attributed to you. You say, we at the United Nations are in the business of hope and selling hope. Many things concern me, you say, including climate risk, but we signed up to this job to work for the UN, to do what we do so that we can help the world, so that it can be a better place for everybody, including your own daughter. The world isn't a safe place, Mr. Yahya, at this moment as we speak,
Absolutely.
with all the different conflicts that engulf different parts of the world. How pertinent does the role of the United Nations become under the situation?
I always want to start with what inspired me, and you asked me previously why I joined the UN. There's a quote by Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the second Deputy Secretary General since the formation of the UN. And you know he died tragically in a plane crash in the Congo. He was quoted saying, the UN was not created in order to take us to heaven. It was created in order to stop us going to hell. This is really important because I always get, people always have high expectation what the UN should do. And absolutely they should, because the UN represents the best of us, our best aspirations. That is in the UN Charter, in the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, because that's the best of us. But we're also humans, so we are not yet there in many of those places. So you look at the situation in Gaza, the incredible loss of human life, the civilians that are dying every day. You look at the situation in Sudan, the situation in Ukraine. So of course, there's a lot of things that we haven't been able to solve, but being in the UN and our DNA essentially is that tomorrow will be better than today. That if the UN staff and the UN system gives up on reaching that aspirations as articulated in the Charter, then we should all pack up and go home. So we're always in the business of hope. And not naivete. It's not a hope that is not based on anything. Today, in the Gaza situation, we've lost 220 UN staff.
Yes.
Who were waking up every morning, put their life at risk, and many of them have died, to make and support those communities to have a better life.
To bring aid, to bring food to
Absolutely. And today here in this country, we have thousands, up to 4,000 UN staff across Pakistan, waking up every morning, helping communities, pushing the polio agenda to eradicate poverty, to work on issues of education and girls' education. That's what the UN is about. Are there challenges in Pakistan? Absolutely.
Of course.
We know the numbers in relation to children out of school. We know the numbers of nutrition and challenges about nutrition and stunting. But we wake up every morning, we roll our sleeves, and we go to work. Because we believe tomorrow, Pakistan and the world will be much better. And there are many Pakistanis in the UN working towards that agenda. So we are hopeful.
Exactly, and I think it's a very able and dedicated, passionate group of individuals that make up the United Nations. Because if the passion or the zeal or the dedication wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to persevere under the current geostrategic conditions that the world is in.
Absolutely. And we always remind people, yes, the situation is terrible for people of Gaza, people of Ukraine, people of Sudan, people of Central Africa. We can go on and on. But I always also say, we have overcome bigger challenges. We can also overcome this challenge. So we are committed to that. And those of us who are in Pakistan are extremely buoyant and extremely optimistic about where Pakistan will go and how Pakistan will look tomorrow.
All right, Mr. Yahya, I'd like to again quote you because you're here in Pakistan, you're talking of Pakistan, and I'd like to refer to what you said when you were about to arrive in Pakistan. I think this is what you said, and I quote, "I'm really excited about this new job in Pakistan. I'm tasked to work across the entire UN presence and be the humanitarian coordinator to support Pakistan's development ambition, its acceleration to meet the SDGs, but also its ability to deal with climate-induced crises such as flooding and other forms of climate-related impacts." So exciting times. I'm looking forward to that, and the UN as a huge presence in Pakistan. When you look at the history of the United Nations and Pakistan, I said it in the very beginning, 2 years after the United Nations came into being in 1945, after the Second World War, Pakistan becomes independent and joins the United Nations as well. How do you see the relationship between your organization and our country? What progress have you seen since 1947 and till 2024? What are you also looking forward to?
First, Pakistan has a unique relationship with the United Nations. And I said this in my introduction. Pakistan has informed our normative value. Pakistan sends more than 236,000 peacekeepers in 48 countries to protect communities and vulnerable groups, to bring peace and sustain peace. Pakistan is an active member of the UN system. Recently, the Summit of the Future, Pakistan played an incredible role in
last month.
Yes, played an incredible role in getting a consensus among the G77. Pakistan is an active player. So Pakistan is an integral part of the UN system. And for me to be posted in one of the most important countries for the UN, I remember I was appointed for this job, both the Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General told me clearly, you're going to one of the most important and UN-friendly countries in the world.
And the Secretary General was here in Pakistan
Absolutely, and is a big fan of Pakistan. And for me, that is both an incredible opportunity to be in a country that is very pro-UN, but it's also expectations are high. This is a country that wants the UN to deliver. It's a country that, and I already seen this, my engagement with the EAD here, they're very clear, the kind of accountability they want from the UN. They want to know what we're doing, how we're doing, and hold us accountable to the commitments we've made to the people and government of Pakistan.
I think that's very important. Commitment is also a key word that the United Nations stands for, because this is what you want in whichever country you are across the world. This is what you are. You are committed to the job that you are entailed with. You are committed to the tasks that you are given, and you're also committed to the countries that you work with in order to bring not only the different SDGs and implement them in place, but also to look at how you could, under the circumstances that are provided to you, work for the betterment of the country that you are in.
Absolutely. And this comes back to the issue of agenda for hope. we are committed. It's very difficult for me sometimes to explain this to our partners, that the UN is very infectious. We're infectious with hope. We really think this country, any country we go to, can do better and will do better. And that the country's ownership and leadership and its people and its culture are the foundations of that. So I can tell you I've never been more hopeful. And I know the recent economic crisis in Pakistan, the issues of climate change and the impact of climate change. I have seen the devastation of this. So people can be pessimistic sometimes. But I always tell them being pessimistic does not lead to anything. It's those who wake up every morning and say, you know what, regardless of the circumstances I'm in, tomorrow will be better, and go to work. And I think Pakistan and Pakistanis are that kind of people. So we're very blessed to be here, and we're very lucky to be able to work every day with Pakistanis across this country. And I've traveled already. I've been to Balochistan, I've been to Sindh, I've been to Punjab, I've been to KPK. So I look forward to being inspired by the people of this country, but also we look forward to a Pakistan that is prosperous, peaceful, and green, as we say in the UN.
The 24th of October was the United Nations Day. I know it because we are recording on that day, but of course by the time the program is aired, this day would have passed 79 years, Mr. Yahya. 79 very important years for the United Nations, and 79 years full of challenges, and those challenges only increase with time. They have never decreased. This is what I've seen in the whole history of the United Nations. And as you said, you go on with that zeal and that passion and that hope that you will bring that change in the world, in whichever part of the world you are in. When you talk of the UN Charter, how important is the implementation of that today, in this day and age, when you see a lot of suffering, when you see a lot of climate-induced crises, when you see a lot of poverty and so many other challenges that the world confronts?
No, so I mean, I was asked by many Pakistani colleagues and friends, is the UN Charter still relevant 79 years later? The question I asked is how, to me, the UN Charter is the best aspiration of humankind. And many can point out to the sufferings and the crisis we're going through in the world. But I can tell you that charter is as relevant today and more relevant today than it has been since it was written 79 years ago. However, the Secretary General has been very clear. The institutions, be it the financial institutions, the IFIs, how the international system works overall, is out of date for 21st century. This is why we've had the Summit of the Future. This is why he has pushed for a global data digital compact, compact for the future generations. And it's a realization that we can do more, that the financial systems in the world don't work for the poor countries or developing countries, that the structure and the representation of the Security Council needs to evolve and to be much more representative of the world as it is today. So there's a lot of reforms that needs to be made, but the foundation of the UN, the charter that starts with we the people, is as relevant as today as it has ever been.
All right. Now, when you talk of we the people, I can't help but talk about the 24 organizations that form the United Nations. How challenging are the different responsibilities of these organizations with respect to the different continents that they work with? And when it comes to Pakistan, how have you seen the development of these organizations and their cooperation with Pakistan and Pakistani authorities over the decades?
So we have, in UN globally, we have more than 40 agencies and departments. But in Pakistan, we have 24 who are here that have signed and work on the cooperation framework with I like to call it compact with Pakistan, things that Pakistanis should hold us accountable to. In that sense, there's a lot of work to do. I mentioned the development challenges in Pakistan are immense. There are 26 million children out of school. There are 20 million children stunted. The issues around nutrition. Climate crisis is real and it is impacting and literally washing away investments, infrastructure. The government figures for 2022, $30 billion lost through the flooding. So the challenges are immense. Inflation is an issue for many people. So within that context, the UN remains a strong and a partner to government and people of Pakistan. We offer any technical support government asks. We look for financing for the country. We engage with districts and provincial leaders. But it's always important to always re-emphasize, and sometimes our colleagues are not, let's say they're not aware that the UN is a non-governmental
Yes.
so it's an intergovernmental organization. It's not an NGO. So people always sometimes think why don't we behave like an NGO? Well, they're NGOs and they're important work, but the UN is an intergovernmental organization. Essentially means we're here at the request of the government of Pakistan. We work with the government of Pakistan and we support the government and people of Pakistan. And sovereignty and Pakistan's leadership and ownership is key component of the support that the UN provides to Pakistan.
All right. Now, with reference to your 79th day, I'd like to refer to what our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif tweeted and also messaged, and of course that was also shown on the different television channels. I'd like to just highlight it because I feel it's important from our perspective. He talks about the UN Charter as well that we've alluded to a little bit before in the program, that he says provides the basis for a peaceful and prosperous world.
Absolutely.
He talks about the international conflicts like climate change, heightened geopolitical tensions, power rivalry, and deepening economic woes of the global south.
Yeah.
He says that the world is in massive disarray because of these challenges. He also says that at the heart of all of this is the UN's inability, and I'd like to quote him, inability to enforce its charter in an equitable manner, especially when the matter involves the question of the right to self-determination of peoples under foreign occupation, such as in Palestine or in Jammu and Kashmir. As long as the provisions of the UN's founding document are ignored, the crisis will continue to deepen. On the UN Day, I reiterate Pakistan's commitment to multilateralism. We will continue to work with the UN to make this world a better place for all, where rights of the people, especially those struggling for their just, legitimate and inalienable rights, are realized. How do you view this message of our Prime Minister? How important is for the UN to continue striving for the rights of the peoples and communities of the world?
As I said, I agree with the Prime Minister that the Charter is a foundation and a valid document. It empowers all of us individually. It recognizes the economic and social rights of people. It recognizes sovereignty of nations. So it's very much a valid and actually revolutionary document for 79 years. Very few documents last that long.
True.
And become a core foundation. I haven't seen any nation challenge the Charter. Now, is there deviations from the Charter? Are there challenges? Are we as a global community adhering to the letter of the Charter? I think the Prime Minister is right in the sense that there are countries that are not necessarily in line or are behaving as articulated in the Charter. And then it's the job of the Security Council to ensure, specifically when it comes to things that threaten peace and security. Now, you know how the Security Council is structured.
I know.
And
I talked many a times in my shows.
Exactly. So those are discussions of a political nature.
Yes.
And from a Secretary General's perspective, who's the Chief Administrator of the UN, our boss, his job is to make sure that he speaks out, he's consistent with the Charter, and he has, I think, very few people will argue that he has been very consistent.
Yes.
On speaking out.
And very persuasive as well.
And speaking out when there's a deviation from the Charter, and reminding member states their responsibility towards the Charter. Now, as the Prime Minister also pointed out, there are more that can be done around equity, issues around how international institutions are structured. So a lot of challenges remain, but as I always remind people, the glass is half full, not half empty. And the Summit of the Future and the outcomes of the Summit of the Future has shown, even in a divided world, we can have consensus. We can agree on basic things that bring our common humanity and advance our common humanity. So I'm hopeful and I agree, and I'm very happy to hear the government and people of Pakistan are committed to multilateralism because that is what the UN represents.
Mr. Yahya, in September, the world leaders also adopted the United Nations Pact for the Future in New York. Now, from sustainable development, climate action to digital governance and youth empowerment, it provides a comprehensive roadmap of global cooperation for addressing the most pressing issues of our time now in the 21st century. Now, despite all of these challenges, no other global organization with the legitimacy, convening power, and normative impact is there other than the United Nations. What is this pact of the future and how critical is the quote unquote implementation of this pact of the future? I can't emphasize enough on this word implementation because that is a word that evades many a country in the world around nowadays.
The good news is, first, nobody thought in this divided, we probably most divided we've been for a very long time, that member states can agree on consensus on the pact for the future. So that is a hopeful thing. So it's, for me, the summit of the future and the outcome summit of the future shows that with all the divisions in the world, there's a common sense that runs through the international system. Here we have an agreement on digital compact. What does that mean in real time? It means how do we govern, for example, artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence has it could be a positive for development. It could solve a lot of our problems, but also could be a force that could be used for abuse of human rights. It could be used for many
there are a lot of red lines, when it comes
exactly. So here the international community has agreed. What has the Secretary General done? He has put a committee in place to start the process of implementation, all the agreements around Summit of the Future. I've just come back from a retreat of all the head of UN entities from more than 136 countries. We met the Secretary General and his marching orders were, now I have this agreement, I'll put together the mechanism for implementation and I expect you to go back to your countries that you are supporting and agree with the government on how this will be implemented to advance our common humanity. So we're committed to making sure that we move from agreement and, to use your words, implementation.
Mr. Yahya, climate change is one of the calamities that Pakistan has gone through in the last decades. We've seen in 2022 how 1/3 of the country was submerged underwater and the economic implications were humongous. Many pledges were made, the pledges have yet to be realized properly. This said, the United Nations came up with a contingency plan this summer as well and set aside $40 million to respond to any kind of emergency in this year. I mean, I'm not talking about the previous year, where the UN has also been very robust in its action to help Pakistan in this time of need. But even this year, you were there with a contingency plan. Pakistan is one of the countries that contributes less than 1% as far as emissions, carbon emissions is concerned, but it is one of the countries most susceptible to the effects of climate change. My question becomes twofold in that respect. How important is climate change to the United Nations, and how do you feel has been the UN help to Pakistan to alleviate the effects of climate change, that you continue to do so?
So climate change is an existential threat for Pakistan. I have seen it firsthand. I visited communities that have been impacted by the floods in Sindh, but I've also seen the impact of communities in the north, in Chitral, and the glacial impact, where entire communities, villages have been displaced. So, and you're absolutely right, this is not something that Pakistan has contributed to. The global warming was something that, as a result of rich developed countries that have been polluting the earth through emissions for decades. Poor countries or developing countries like Pakistan are bearing the brunt of those challenges. Now, what is Pakistan to do? I think there are two things. One is the adaptation agenda. The climate has changed. Unfortunately, we will continue to have these floodings, we will continue to have irregular rainfalls, we will continue to have these heat waves. So communities have to adapt to this change in climate, from how they live, their livelihood, to protecting themselves against flooding and drought. So adaptation is one of those push, and the government has an national adaptation plan in place. I understand. Now we need to help the government at the provincial level and the district level to start implementing this. The other part is to get those who have polluted to pay for and give financing to countries that are suffering from this. This has not been happening. And in many cases, there have been a lot of promises in all the COPs, loss and damage. You remember loss and damage
Yes.
in Sharm el-Sheikh and then adopted in Dubai? Where is the loss and damage resources? Are they coming to Pakistan? One of the things I must say, and this is something that I feel very passionate about, is since I've been here, what has shocked me is Pakistan has been pushed to take loans for reconstruction, for flooding that they did not cause. That's the kind of unjust, when people talk about global unjust and global financial systems that don't work for the developing countries, that's an example. Why should Pakistan take loans for something that they did not cause? Why are countries that have polluted, have created these problems of warming glaciers in Chitral and GB, or floodings down on the Indus that is washing and people? Why are they not contributing financially to the crisis they have created? And I think this is what the Secretary General talks about sometimes, about the inequity in the world that exists. So this is something that I think the UN will speak out and will continue to speak out and will stand shoulder to shoulder with Pakistan to make sure those who are polluted have to pay a bit more, while at the same time Pakistan has to do more in ensuring the resilience, a community's ability to manage predictable flooding, and community's ability to resist droughts and other things are in place, because the technology and the know-how does exist.
You talk of inequalities, Mr. Yahya. Another inequality is as far as the genders are concerned.
Yeah.
Women, girls, you talked about Afghanistan. This is just an example. Even in the developed world, we see a lot of examples where there is not enough gender parity. You've got a huge organization, a very important organization that is called UN Women, that works in that very respect. And I really laud the efforts of UN Women, whether it be in Pakistan, whether it be in other parts of the world, as far as highlighting the rights of the woman or the girl child is concerned. How dear is women empowerment to the United Nations system?
I think, really, this gender equality issue, you can take it from different perspectives. One, if you are a man in Pakistan and you do not see gender equality is in your self-interest, then you really need to educate yourself. Because this country will not go anywhere if half of its population are not either educated or not being given opportunity or been put on the sidelines. So it's in your self-interest. I always tell men, I come from a conservative society, and the same messages I give to my own community when I go back home. This is in your self-interest. Economically, you need a productive society, and you need everybody to contribute. And genius, for example, if you're looking for genius, somebody who's going to transform and solve big ideas, big problems the country is facing, genius is not trapped in gender, in whether you're a man or you're a woman. Genius is genius. How do we find them? How do we get them out and to help this country find pathway to prosperity? So there's the economic agenda. Then there's a rights agenda. We all have mothers, we have sisters. Do we want our sisters and our mothers and our nieces, our friends, our wives, our partners, not to be discriminated against and not have an opportunity to achieve their own aspirations? I mean, I'm telling you, I know from the UN I have to be more diplomatic on this, but I'm very passionate about gender rights.
I think all of the religions also talk very passionately about the right of the woman.
Of course, of course. I'm Muslim. I grew up in a Sufi community. The idea that we don't educate women is not in my religion. I haven't seen it. So it's really, really important that we don't use religion, culture, or other things to stifle competition, I call it. Sometimes you stifle, less women in public life means I can get my job, I have less competition. I think we need everybody to contribute to the economic, political life of Pakistan. And I am sure this country, with all the contradiction, you still produced probably one of the first women prime ministers.
Yes.
I think the first woman prime minister.
Yes.
So I see within the contradictions, you have an equality-driven society. So I'm sure Pakistan will find its balance. But I think
will other countries find their balance? Because I mean, you do talk of Pakistan as an example, but there are so many other countries that are in worse state.
Absolutely, no, it's a global phenomenon. Don't get me wrong. Even in the most developed countries, you look at developed countries, you see equal pay is a problem. Women get paid less. So this is a global phenomenon. But I'm interested in Pakistan because I work here, and my job is to work for Pakistan and the Pakistani people. And the message is clear: show me a country that discriminates against women, I will show you a country that is not prosperous. So prosperity is linked to equity and equality, and this is not a favor. You're not doing anybody a favor. The other part is men. We can't sit back and think this is a struggle for women. It's not. This is our common struggle. And I encourage all of us to really involve ourselves in making sure that how do we create more equity, more opportunity, and more engagement for girls and equally as boys. So this is a challenge. But I tell you, all of us, you're going to have to stop me on this because I get very passionate about this issue. I look at myself, and because development sometimes it's also, when you talk about development, you have to reflect. It's not only what you study in school.
True.
So your own personal experiences has to come into play. I always use this example. I grew up in a not wealthy family in the Kenyan coast when I was when I started going to school. There were periods my father could not pay for school fees. Guess who didn't go to school? My sisters. I was always protected from not going to school if my father couldn't afford school fees because I'm a man. Although my sisters are much better academically. So even today, as the head of the UN, I can tell you I have benefited personally from gender inequality because I have benefited from preferential treatment because I was a boy. So we need to be much more, reflective on these issues, and we need to, we are just delaying our own prosperity and our progress as communities, and specifically in the Islamic world.
When you talk of progress and prosperity, I cannot help but also think about the SDGs. The goal is to, go and implement all of that by the year 2030. We are at the end of 2024. When you look at the different conflicts, challenges, and you've talked about it during the course of the show as well, how optimistic are you that all the SDGs will be implemented by 2030?
Until the last second of the 2030, I will be optimistic. That's my job, and I believe in that because by next year we will have 5 years to go. Again, gender equality is one of those issues that of the SDG focus. So we will push. We'll push until the last minute. The figures are not promising. Admittedly, we have 17% on track globally. So we have to do much more on gender equality, but also all the other 16 SDGs. Overall, it's 17 SDGs. So one of the biggest challenges, though, for the reason why we're not accelerating as fast as we should have, is around financing. The amount of resources that are needed to support developing countries meet the goals, such as Pakistan, the resources are not there. So one of the areas that the UN is now pushing is around issues around financing for development, and we will continuously push on this issue. Some of them are not finance related, some are finance related, some are institutional related, but I am very optimistic and have to be optimistic because I think in the next 5 years, if we accelerate, we invest, we find opportunities for equity and other areas, I think Pakistan can make progress.
All right. Now, I've taken a lot of your time. I know you're a busy man, and there are so many things to discuss. I hope that we'll get the opportunity to talk to it about in another show very, very soon, because there are so many things that are near and dear to Pakistan and to the United Nations that need to be worked upon and that need to be highlighted as well, because there's such a lot of work that you are doing that is not highlighted as much in media as it needs to be, because people need to know the passion with which the UN is working, not only in Pakistan but in all the different countries of the world, and the work that is being done despite the challenges is extremely commendable. What kind of message, Mr. Yahya, bring a smile to your face, what kind of message would you as a resident coordinator, humanitarian coordinator for the UN in Pakistan want to give to Pakistan, to the people of Pakistan through our channel, PTV World?
Well, the first thing is to say that you've been hiding this incredible country from the rest of us. I cannot get over what I've seen. I've seen in Chitral how beautiful Pakistan is. Of course, Pakistan has immense development challenges. I think your government knows the challenges. But also to say that I've been here 9 months now. I have traveled around. I've learned. I've enjoyed your food. But also I've seen a lot of commonalities. I told you when I started this, I told you I come from a Sufi background. Going to Sindh and seeing the graveyards of Sufi saints, so that was incredibly, I just didn't know. I mean, this is the kind of thing, sometimes we're so divided, although we're so, it looks like we're distant as
but there's sort of that binds us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So being here, I see a lot of similarities from where I came from, especially on faith-related issues. But also, I think this country has all the ingredients to take off. You know, I keep telling people, you have a highway. You know, there's this English saying where they say is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes.
You've heard about that. I say some places I've worked in, you don't have tunnels or light. And some places like Pakistan, you have a highway with floodlights. So the opportunity here is there. You have incredible land. You have incredible people, the most hospitable people I have ever come across. You have all the technical capabilities. Pakistanis are everywhere in the world, highly educated, highly mobile, but highly innovative. For example, the head of the regional economic commission for Asia Pacific on economic issues is a Pakistani. He's coming here next week to work with us and support the government of Pakistan. So you have all the technical capabilities. They are all over the place. They are Pakistanis. So you have a fantastic opportunity to take off. The UN will be with you. You can count on us. We are here. We are behind you. And anything the country and the people need, the UN is with you. But you're right. We need to do better in communicating. We need to be much closer to the people. And this is why today, UN Day, I'm here to tell your viewers on what the UN is doing. But also on Saturday, Saturday 26th of October, I invite all Pakistanis to come and join us at PNCA. We will be having 22 agencies telling to the Pakistani public what they do on behalf of the people.
I think it's an all-day event, if I'm not wrong.
It's all day. There'll be music, there'll be food, there will be a career booth for those who want to join the UN and see how they can volunteer. So there'll be a lot of opportunities. I welcome all of them. We are there to tell you what we're doing in this country and listen to your perspective. But I really enjoy, and hopefully we'll get to talk more after I've experienced the country in its totality.
Definitely, and I'd like that. And whenever you've got these high-level allegations that come, please let us know. We are here to ask them questions, to let them know, and to also introduce them to the Pakistani community and to the people across our country through our channel, of course. Thank you very much again, Mr. Yahya, to have given us the time to have joined us on your auspicious day. We wish you all the very best. We wish that Pakistan and the UN continue to collaborate, cooperate in the robust manner that they have been doing
Absolutely.
since the last few decades. And I only wish that new chapters start opening between our country and your organization. And as you said, it's an intergovernmental organization. So the more the merrier, the more robust, the better is it. And it's a win-win situation, as I say, for everybody concerned.
Absolutely. I want to make a promise to your viewers.
Yes.
In 2 years, inshallah, well, if God allows us to be alive and healthy, we'll do this interview in Urdu.
Okay. Ladies and
Thank
gentlemen,
you.
that brings us to the end of today's diplomatic enclave. We'll see you, inshallah, with another guest very soon. But of course, as I say, the United Nations continues to be a pivotal organization for the world, for Pakistan. It is also important that the countries across the world realize the importance of the United Nations and give it the mandate that it has been needing in order to bring that change in the world. Think about that. I think change is what the world needs right now. Allah Hafiz. And thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Yahya.
you for that. Really enjoyed it.